Well, welcome everybody to Optometric Education Consultants National Webinar Series, Tuesday night edition. Tonight we have CBD, THC, TCB, I'm sorry, that's Elvis, and marijuana weeding through the choices with Greg Caldwell and a special help from Dr. Tracy Offerdahl. Greg Caldwell is a graduate of Pennsylvania College of Optometry, where he completed a residency there. He is a diplomate of the American Board of Optometry, and he is also a fellow of the American Optometric Association. He is a fellow of the Optometric Glaucoma Society. He is co-founder of Optometric Education Consultants and co-administrator of OCT Connect on Facebook. He's lectured extensively throughout the country and other countries internationally. He served as president of the Pennsylvania Optometric Association and served on the AOA Board of Trustees from 2013 to 2016. And he's president of the Blair Clearfield Association for the Blind. Tracy Offerdahl is a PharmD who attended Temple University School of Pharmacy, both her undergraduate and graduate degrees. After getting her PharmD degree, she completed a residency at Temple University Hospital, and she is currently on faculty at Salus University Department of Optometry, where she's course director and instructor for all systemic pharmacology courses for the students in optometry, audiology, and physician assistant program. She's also a practicing clinical pharmacist. She is also, as a PharmD, a fellow of the American Academy of Optometry, and considers herself the first and founding member of the Society of Optocentric Pharmacists.
You bet.
So with that, please give a nice welcome to Greg and Tracy.
Thanks, Joe. And again, we're going to be doing CBD, THC, marijuana, weeding through the choices here. Every time we do a COPE program, we got to go through the disclosures. Probably the best one here for Tracy and I is the content of this was prepared independently by both of us. You can see my laundry list of who I've lectured for, the advisory boards. Certainly in this lecture, nothing is influenced, and that's not how I do my lectures, but this list is not really to impress you, but if we're going to try and Joe and I deliver and Tracy deliver current, we just have to kind of be working with these companies to see what's coming. I do sit as the PA medical director for Involve. It's a managed Medicaid. I sit as a chairman for Council for Diabetes and AMD for a registry. Again, the biggest thing that we talk about tonight, there will be no commercial bias and no superiority over products. And I think you guys figured out Joe and I are the owners of Optometric Education Consultants. Tracy.
I don't have as much to disclose. I pretty much teach, and then work a couple days a week clinically. But as Greg said, the most important thing is while we may say a formulation or a type of CBD in particular is superior just in terms of how it's made, certainly no brand name products or even any generics will we claim superiority, and we independently prepared this.
Perfect. So what I always like to point out is, when Tracy and I lecture together, being an optometrist and a pharmacist, a lot of people, when she starts chatting, they think maybe Tracy's an optometrist, but PharmD, and I'm the optometrist, and we kind of do this interprofessional type of lecturing. And I like pointing out that, I have an owner in the building, private practice, exam lane, see patients, saw patients today. And then over here, reminding everyone that Tracy is in academia, but Tracy, looks like you have, what's that say there? Rosemont Pharmacy. So you have your own apothecary that you work with a group?
Yeah, my friends, a couple of my friends own it. I've been there since 1990, so a long time. And yeah, we're kind of a neighborhood pharmacy, but we're specialty. So we do a lot of compounding of medications, and we work collaboratively with a lot of physicians and physician groups. And yeah, it's a great place to be.
Great. So both Tracy and I are in the real world, I guess, if you want to say,
Yeah.
academia and in the real world. So Tracy, I think you put this slide in here at one point, optometrist, CBD, yes, THC, no, you want to kind of chat on that?
Oh yeah, you and I were talking about this a couple months ago, just in terms of how we present our information and how passionate we are about holistic medicine, in particular functional medicine, and certainly CBD and THC have become really important topics all over the United States. In general, across the United States, optometrists can certainly recommend CBD, to their patients for whatever type of ailment. Greg could give you some more specifics on that. But THC, which is considered medical marijuana, you're really not even allowed to, suggest the patient should seek, care for medical marijuana. And maybe Greg can maybe explain this a little bit more, but each state has kind of wonky laws, even something as simple as over-the-counter medications, whether or not you can recommend or dose an over-the-counter medication, depending upon, what type of medical or healthcare license you have. And with medical marijuana, an optometrist is not allowed to sign patients up and prescribe it. Is that a good way to say it, Greg?
Yep, that's a great way of saying it. Yep.
So, patients can be on it, you can talk to them about it, but you can't be part of the link that gets them set up for it, more or less. All right, let's see, I'll grab the remote here. Oh, there we go.
So we have a polling question before we get started here.
Mhm.
And I got it launched. I have used CBD in my optometric practice to manage or treat a patient. And then yes, no, or I didn't realize that optometrists could recommend CBD. And that's kind of how I was until, Tracy and I were asked to put this lecture together for a couple state associations and, did our due diligence. And you'll see here in the history of Tracy, you trying to come back in again?
Nope. I'm here.
Someone's trying to join under your name.
Oh, the nerve.
All right, so I'm going to end the poll. I'll share the results. And we had one person that has used CBD in the optometric practice to manage or treat a patient, and 78, and then about 20% here have didn't realize they could prescribe it. So that's why we hold these lectures. So
Yeah.
all right. So all right, Chase, what I'm going to do is I think I'm going to turn over the after this, I'll turn over the remote control to you because it's a lot of your slides. But really, the history of cannabinoids here, prohibition has been around for only about 80 years. It was widely used for 5,000, 8,000 years before. That means marijuana or hemp or any of the plants that we talk about tonight, for depending on what you look at and how far you go back and do the research, 5,000, 8,000 years. And in the last 80 years, it was ruled out. And it wasn't really outlawed because of lack of efficacy or safety. It was outlawed, due to political and, monetary reasons. And if you look and just kind of see how things occurred, in 1937, that's whenever the Marijuana Act was passed. But then that is, you want to talk about politics back then, politics now. Oh my gosh, it was so much better back then than it is now. Yeah, I'm not sure how true it is when you start looking at history, but 1937, the Marijuana Act is passed, and then, kind of neat how all of a sudden a year or two later, pharmacy comes out and, morphine and the opioids are developed. So, shut down that kind of pain management. And now you got a pharmaceutical type of morphine and opioid. So CBD and THC were considered Schedule 1 narcotics through 2018. And now CBD is not considered Schedule 1. And that's why you kind of see them all over the place. I just drove back from the Pittsburgh airport. When I fly, I have to go, it's 100 miles to the Pittsburgh airport. And the other day, I think I was up to like 12 CBD places along, Route 22 on the way down, or at least advertisements. I was counting everything. So we've come a long way with CBD. The NIH now funds studies. The World Health Organization in 2018 said, hey, there's no dependency, there's no public health concerns, followed by the FDA in 2018, that there's no potential for abuse. So that's just kind of the history there behind the CBD. So Tracy, I'm going to see if I can share the remote control somewhere. Maybe you grabbed it already.
Let's see. Let me try again. Sometimes these things work flawlessly and sometimes they don't. Let me see. Request remote control. I'm requesting remote control from you.
I'm approving.
Okay, good. Okay, there we go. So as Greg was talking about the 1937 Marijuana Act, and then, around the same time, morphine as a natural opioid, but one that had been, fully elucidated finally from opium and, laudanum and whatever other name you want to give, morphine type drug prior to about World War II. The biggest thing with marijuana is there really was, some potential addiction issues, and it was being widely used. And, there was even some issue with it being tied to immigrants from the Southern Hemisphere. And there was just a lot kind of intertwined with sort of the ridiculous notion that it needed to be completely outlawed. But with that, I think it's significant just to reiterate what Greg said, that it was a Schedule 1 narcotic until THC and CBD until 2018. And 2018, we had the second iteration of this. On this slide, it says the 2014 Farm Bill, which particularly looked at these products, THC and CBD, in greater detail. And this is where we get our first definition of something called industrial hemp. So keep that in the back of your brain. You're going to hear us say it multiple times because it's important to kind of differentiate industrial hemp and the federal law, and then the states, how they use that to allow both sometimes THC and CBD. But as a Schedule 1 narcotic from 1937 until 2018, think of what else is listed as a Schedule 1 narcotic. And you probably haven't even thought about this in a forever or if ever. A Schedule 1 narcotic by definition means that it's the most highly abused of all abusive medications with addiction potential, essentially. And in that category, we have heroin, we had THC, we had CBD, LSD, peyote mushrooms, crystal methamphetamine. I don't know, I could go on and on, but it's crazy that CBD and even THC would be in the same category as LSD, heroin, peyote mushrooms, crystal methamphetamine, ecstasy, etc. So as Greg said, there was a lot of politics and money things that just were woven into this. And, pharmaceutical companies and sort of government had better control over consumers in 1937 and thereafter, when morphine in particular became very popular and a really important medication for sure. So just getting back now to kind of moving forward with what we had this Agriculture Act of 2014. It was our first farm bill. And like I said, it really better defined this industrial hemp. And it permitted states to start growing it in these research programs, et cetera. And even more importantly, it did not require a DEA license anymore for CBD. So you can just you'll see how this unfolds to today. Then we had the second iteration of the Farm Bill 2018. It replaced the initial one, which is true of bills in general, reevaluated and updated the bill that addressed CBD, which is cannabidiol, that is derived from hemp. And now this industrial hemp shows up again. This is what we call it in terms of a legislative type term. It legalized hemp. It removed the plant and derivatives from its definition of marijuana under the Controlled Substance Act. So that's why the title of this is CBD, THC, and marijuana. Even though THC and marijuana can be used interchangeably most of the time, if not almost all of the time, CBD is different. And you're going to see how very clearly CBD is a different type of medicinal agent. And then in 2018, it also, punted it specifically to the states, and that's where it lies currently. Most states are pretty good about CBD, but there's still a few states that have, some wonky laws. So with our introduction and definitions of, kind of why this is so important, and Greg, you chime in whenever you like. I was reading a survey today from, it was in Drugstore News or something like that. And it said since COVID began, almost 40% of those that were surveyed, and it was people all over the map in terms of age, gender, where they lived in the United States, but over 40% were more interested in holistic medicine. And not everybody maybe knows the definition of that, but essentially they wanted more natural cures. They thought it was important, particularly since COVID, to kind of pay attention to what can I do naturally, holistically, functionally, integratively with some of these plant type substances. Because if we learned one thing from COVID, it's that we don't always have a preventive measure or a cure. And that was true for a long time in COVID. So what you learn in optometry school, what I learned in pharmacy school, what I teach my students now, except I've added the functional medicine component, you get this traditional or conventional medicine, and where we learn it's Western medicine. So it's the integration of the knowledge, skills, and practices indigenous to an individual culture. So, traditional or conventional medicine for us is what we call allopathic medicine or Western medicine. Some of my students that came from Middle Eastern countries, Asian nations, et cetera, their conventional or traditional medicine is very different. And, it's such a beautiful way to kind of integrate everything from all of these different indigenous cultures. Used to prevent, diagnose, improve, and or treat physical or mental illness. And that's the definition according to the FDA of like what a traditional prescription or over-the-counter medicine will do. It's to prevent, diagnose, improve, or treat a patient, whatever their illness is, physical or mental. So this is just the typical way we utilize our skills and meds to treat patients. We got another poll question.
So, do you consider yourself an integrative optometrist? Yes, no, not sure what the heck I'm even asking. And then, have you used or recommended supplements like vitamins or AREDS2 or omega-3s or EPA, DHA? Have you used Vital Tears, which are the autologous serum eye drops, the ASET or Regenerize or amniotic membranes? Or we're talking about CBD tonight or probiotics. Have you maybe even hypochlorous acid, Avanova, tea tree oil? We can add to that list. All of those things that we use, potentially in the office. Have you used those? So do you consider yourself an integrative optometrist? Yes, no, not even sure what the heck you're asking. And then have you used any of these below, and maybe even more, those kind of, if you want to say, natural products, hypochlorous acid, tea tree oil. I guess that would be like Clearadex and Avanova. All right, Joe, I'm not going to steal the remote from Tracy, so I'm going to let you end that. And so looks like we got about 56, a little over majority. We got 20% saying no, and we got about 24% saying, hey, what the heck you asking there? And then we have 93% that have used those products or something natural, and about 7% that have said no. So, all right. So Tracy, I'm just going to steal the mouse real quick, and I'll let you grab it here. And The reason why, we ran that polling question was, allopathic medicine is what we consider our traditional medicine. That's what, Joe, Tracy, and I, we grew up on, at least in Joe and I in optometry school. Opposites cure. You have glaucoma, lower the IOP. You got an infection, use an antibiotic. You got an inflammation, use a steroid or some type of anti-inflammatory. Opposites cure that's out there. That's kind of like your allopathic medicine that we grew up with. Now, complementary or integrative medicine is, if you want to say, is listed here. You have homeopathic and naturopathic, chiropractic care, Chinese traditional medicine, kind of those, what the 93% of the population have said they've used these natural products, right? Vitamins, AREDs, omegas, EPA, DHA, vitamins, vital tears, right? You're taking autologous blood serum, tea tree oil. Those are all kind of, you want to say, kind of natural or homeopathic, Chinese medicine, whichever fall into there. And so when you take what we've been taught in optometry school, like let's say someone's getting an injection in their eye, and I'm using a vitamin that has maybe quercetin and different types of anti-inflammatories in there, along with the VEGF injection or anti-VEGF injection, that's complementary, or it's integrative. That's the integrative medicine. So when you're treating meibomian gland dysfunction, let's say maybe you're using minocycline and you're telling the patients to take some EPA and DHA. Well, you're using allopathic medicine on the meibomian gland side, and then you're using the EPA DHA, but you didn't go like truly, naturopathic, or you didn't go truly, maybe alternative medicine where you're not going to use allopathic, but you're being integrative or complementing the allopathic side. So those 93% that if you prescribe that, you're treating a condition, you can consider yourself an integrative or complementary type of doc that's out there. So just be aware of those definitions that's out there. Trace, do you want to add anything to that? Nope, you're muted.
Greg, ironically enough, a lot of people I don't think are familiar with the term allopathic medicine. That is your traditional MD. And I worked at Nova University for many years, and we were affiliated with an osteopathic college. And then they added an allopathic college of medicine. And I used to, I had this friend who was an ophthalmologist, and he was an MD, and he was an allopathic, went to allopathic medical school, and he was always very interested to hear about osteopathic medical school because he never really understood it. And I made the comment about him being an allopathic physician. He goes, "No, I'm not. I went to medical school." I said, "Yeah, I know. You went to allopathic medical school." He said, "No, I didn't. I went to medical school." And we went like around and around and around. And, he had done all his years of medicine and, never heard the term allopathic. And he was actually getting angry with me that I was calling him an allopath. He said, "No, I'm a real doctor." Okay.
Not one of those homeopaths, right?
No.
Or chiropractor, whatever. They're the best, those, non-allopathic practitioners that add to our allopathic and osteopaths and things like that.
So, I guess Joe makes up a good point too here for Tracy and I that, here we have allopathic, kind of conventional medicine, Western medicine. We could probably add osteopathic into there. Then you have, if you want to say, alternative or homeopathic, or maybe light cure using homeo. And then, functional medicine, trying to get down to, why the medicine of why and treat the cause. And then again, back to integrative, where Western is complementary or Eastern's complementing the Western side of that. So, all right. So we just add some definitions. And even if you, go to Google and just, type in integrative medicine, you could see it's, this is just a copy and paste from Google, that the practice of integrative medicine refers to blending conventional and evidence-based natural and complementary medicines and therapies with lifestyles to deliver holistic and patient-centered care. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is because that's CBD, right? CBD is a plant-like structure here that, that we're going to be talking about, and THC, and it's, how it can be used in a sense medically. But those are plant-like. So that's not really taking, an Alcon, an Allergan, a whatever pharmaceutical company and making a drug out of it. So that's just integrative again medicine. And that's what, when you're learning about CBD and THC, that's kind of where you are. All right, Trace, let's see. So I'll let you take this. This is your slide here, I believe, or
Yeah, thanks. It was perfect time for you to talk. My dog started barking, so we removed them from the room.
all right.
So integrative, and you've heard both of us use the term a couple times tonight already. It's really the best of both worlds. And, I sort of fell into this. I have, if you've heard me speak, I've always say that I have, rheumatoid arthritis and lupus. And 10 years ago, I was just so full of medication, Remicade infusion every 4 to 6 weeks, methotrexate, Plaquenil, plus a litany of other things. And I was still not doing well. And it reached the point where I was like, I have to try something different. And so, I kind of went into this whole world kicking and screaming and said, fine, do whatever. I don't really believe in it, but I guess I'll give it a go. And, it changed my life. And I've been off of all of my medication for almost 10 years and just on holistic medicine, integrative type stuff. So it's not alternative medicine. And I just say that in the sense that all the pure definition of alternative medicine, and some practitioners that actually practice alternative medicine, they will not dive into the world of Western medicine medicinally. So they don't believe in drugs. They don't believe in a lot of interventions or anything like that. I'm a pharmacist, and I would take an herb any day of the week before I would take a drug, a true pharmaceutical, but there is a place for sure for those medications as well. And that's why integrative is so great. Homeopathy, if you're, want to dive into something very innocuous from a side effect perspective, start tinkering with homeopathy. A lot of people don't believe it works, but I love it. I've used it in our horses, our dogs, our cats, chickens, anything you can imagine, and they can't lie. So it either works or it doesn't. Pretty amazing stuff. So some choices in optometric care that your patients might be on, or that you might even be recommending per the polling questions. CBD, something to consider, even as kind of a side comment to a patient that might be suffering from migraines or pain or whatever. It's one of those discussions where you're like, hey, you know what? Heard a lot of good things about CBD. Why don't you talk to your blank about it? If it's an indication that's outside of optometric care, which migraine wouldn't necessarily be outside of your purview. Vitamin supplementation, vitamin D, the fats, the good fats, the omega-3s balancing with the good omega-6s, the alpha-linolenic acid, and anti-allergy supplements. There's a load of those: bromelain, quercetin, resveratrol, all kinds with allergies. And especially this time of year, think of how many patients you have probably seen that show up with, allergic eye. I don't know. There's probably a name for it. Keratitis. What is it, Greg or Joe?
I was on mute. Sorry. Allergic conjunctivitis. You got it.
Conjunctivitis. There you go. Allergic conjunctivitis. Patients come in with that all the time, even in the pharmacy when I'm there. So there are some great, more systemic anti-allergy things that you can take that work fabulously for eyes and other. So we're going to get into the weeds here a little bit with some pharmacology. You can't avoid it. It gives you a better understanding of, structurally how CBD and THC are similar and yet very different, and why a person can use CBD and have great benefits, but then maybe try THC or marijuana and they have a terrible time on it. And vice versa. Somebody can do great, or they, enjoy either recreationally or use medicinally THC or marijuana, and yet when they tried CBD, they're like, actually a pharmacist I've worked with for 32 years said to me today, are you going to talk about me? He's one of my best friends from South Philly. He's like, hey, tell those people that you gave me enough CBD that it almost killed me, but I didn't have any benefit from it. And I was like, what do you mean it almost killed you? And he said, well, it was probably enough to kill a person. And I was like, no, that's the whole point. He goes, well, it killed my bank account. He used an enormous dose over the course of 4 weeks, not dictated by me in any way, shape, or form. And he didn't notice any benefit at all from it. And he wanted it for blood pressure, anxiety, etc. But he has a long and sordid history, he says, of smoking marijuana in his younger days, and he had great benefits from it. So that's not unusual. Our dietary supplements, according to the FDA, just as an FYI, is anything that you can find in CVS or the dollar store or Five Below or a grocery store or a gas station that would fall into the vitamins, minerals, herbs, botanicals, amino acids, enzymes. I was even online today trying to find, I love reishi mushroom powder. It's an adaptogen. That's considered a dietary supplement. But the key is categorically that dietary supplements are not allowed to say they treat or diagnose or prevent or cure diseases. Companies get into big trouble when they say that about a dietary supplement. But our patients expect us to have some basic knowledge. And even if we don't know something about a particular dietary supplement or holistic approach, they at least want us to be able to say, you know what, I don't really know much about that, but go look here or talk to this person. And it's really a good set of skills, learning this stuff that we can give our patients.
Trace, I'm going to kind of intervene there and just
Sure.
kind of let people know that, that's just by definition, right? I think we all know that, there are certain herbs and vitamins out there that can lower cholesterol that's out there. I have plenty of cases now where, it took me a while to start digging into this, but I'm reversing drusen, so can I say that, hey, this supplement that I'm using treats macular degeneration? Well, I sure can. I'm a doc and I can say that, but the company can't say that. That's for sure.
Right.
So I guess the
It can't
company
be on the
really likes,
packaging.
so that's the difference between a drug, right? And I'm sure Tracy's going to talk about that, but so you as a doc, you could say, yeah, I'm going to use this to treat your eye ailment, your drusen, help treat your glaucoma that's there through a integrative way. But can the company come out and claim that it does that? If it does, they're in violation, and then that would be considered a drug. So I don't have a problem telling the patients, yeah, I'm treating your macular degeneration with this, but the company certainly can't come out and the company is not going to say, hey, I told Greg that this supplement can treat macular degeneration. So just some clarity there.
Yeah, and that's a good point. When you really do a deep dive into a lot of this holistic medicine, functional medicine, integrative, you can really go into a rabbit hole of, some conspiracy theories. But, usually when there's some sort of theory or rumor, it's usually rooted in some degree of truth. So, I am a big fan of big pharma, as some people call them, pharmaceutical companies. We need them. They provide a lot of life-saving medications and interventions. But there's also some truth to the fact that, it's not in the best interests of large pharmaceutical companies to have any type of support with, like Greg was saying, some supplements that he uses can reverse drusen. There are supplements that can lower cholesterol. They're just great ones. It's something that is a bit of a tough nut to, I don't even know how to explain it other than to say they're in competition with each other, pure and simple. But I don't think it necessarily has to be. We can use them both. So we already saw what's a drug. I'm just going to reiterate this real quick because we're going to go into then, well, where does THC fall and where does CBD fall? And it's going to be a little bit surprising. Remember, a drug, whether it's over counter or prescription from a pharmaceutical company, has to undergo phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. And then once it's approved by the Food and Drug Administration with the new drug application, it goes into the phase 4 post-marketing surveillance, which is patients are using it, prescribers are prescribing it, and pharmacists are dispensing it. And now we're collecting data voluntarily for any type of adverse effect, or maybe even an additional indication, minimally for the next 10 years. Foods, where does a food fall? I mean, it's kind of a silly question, but a food by definition is anything that's for use as a food or drink in humans. So then you kind of scratch your head and say, well, where do edibles fall? You know, with THC, a CBD chocolate bar, or tinctures that contain these types of chemicals. CBD does not fall into a drug category. CBD and THC do not fall into the drug category. They do not fall into the food category because it's not really something that you can get for nutritional purposes. And this is all according to the Food and Drug Administration. And they also do not fall into the dietary supplement category, which is kind of silly. And here's the meaning, or here's the reasoning behind that. CBD is approved as a prescription drug. So several years ago, this drug called brand name Epidiolex, it is cannabidiol, which is CBD, was approved rather for a prescription product for very specific and rare types of seizure disorders. So because there is now an approved drug by the Food and Drug Administration, something that is this same chemical structure cannot be anything other than a drug categorically. So it cannot be a dietary supplement. It's not a food, et cetera. It disqualifies it as a potential dietary supplement. So it's in kind of this quasi category. So we'll look into this as soon as we finish poll number 3.
So poll 3 here is, does THC raise, increase, or decrease? And I guess I left the E off. I've been sloppy with my spelling tonight.
It's been a long week and it's only
Yeah.
Tuesday.
And so does THC increase or decrease? And does CBD increase or decrease?
Hey, Greg, while people are weighing in with their answers, I get a direct message, and it may not have been meant for me directly, but what drug reverses drusen? Or what have you used that you have seen reverse drusen?
Yeah, so I use a full supplement out there. I'm affiliated. It's in my disclosures up there. So Pharmanex I use in my practice. I use Life Pack, and really the key that I found is that we got focused on on the lutein and zeaxanthin, and it's such a unfair representation to give the retina, lutein, and zeaxanthin out of all the polyphenols and flavonoids. The lutein and zeaxanthin is in the inner retina, and macular degeneration is a disease of the outer retina, particularly, Brooks membrane. And that's where all your complement factor H's and complement factor 3, and you're seeing a new dry eye, or a new dry macular degeneration, which is going after that complement. So if you look at things like resveratrol and your polyphenols and your quercetins, they treat the outer retina, and they help treat the mitochondria that's on that OCT. So basically, Joe, the short answer is, or the long answer is, and the short is, you got to use something that's full coverage, inner retina, outer retina. And I found that, Life Pack does a great job at that. So.
Thank you, Greg.
And that helped fill the space. So,
Greg,
does
can I comment
THC?
on poll 3?
Yeah, go ahead.
So just the long and short of it is, it says, what does THC do to the IOP? Some chose increase, most of you chose decrease. THC in general does decrease intraocular pressure, but you pretty much have to, smoke marijuana or eat an edible, whatever the case may be, get some form of THC into your body, 6 to 8 to 12 times per day. So it's really an unattainable use for lowering intraocular pressure. CBD at very low doses can actually lower intraocular pressure, but most of the time when we're using therapeutic doses for whatever indication, it's too high and it actually increases intraocular pressure. And I decided to take on the poll number 3 answers simply because you're going to see as we move into now the differences between the two of THC and CBD is they sometimes have opposite effects or opposite results, despite the fact that they both come from industrial hemp and the same plant. So buckle up for that.
Yeah. So one of the rule of thumbs is when you start getting to about 40 milligrams of CBD, it starts to increase the IOP. So, it was kind of a loaded question, and Tracy, went after it. But the point here is that, when you smoke marijuana, it has, both THC and CBD in it. And you got one that's kind of maybe lowering it, maybe increasing it. You got one that's lowering it. And that's why, it's all comes down to, it can be very confusing of why it will or why it won't in glaucoma, because that's usually the biggest question that's out there. Joe, I'm going to have you stop sharing so I don't steal the remote from Tracy. So thanks.
All right, so a few definitions. Now we'll get into the very specific pharmacology regarding these agents. So we have the cannabinoids, which include THC and CBD. They're both cannabinoids. CBD is cannabidiol. THC is delta 9 tetrahydrocannabinol. THC, delta 9 tetrahydrocannabinol, which is also a cannabinoid, sounds like I keep saying the same thing over and over, is the psychoactive component, which comes from cannabis sativa or the others. It's the psychoactive one. It's the only compound in the cannabis plant that will get you high, despite there being, I think, over 2,000 different structures that come from these plants. It's the main active component in cannabis or marijuana, and it will give a positive drug test most of the time. There's a minimum threshold for that, but these tests are pretty sensitive. CBD, that is cannabidiol, is the non-psychoactive component. And as long as the product that you're using is following the industrial hemp and the legal definition of what CBD can be in the United States, federally, as well as according to each state, it will not pop a positive drug test. Now, there are some different types of CBD formulations that we're worried potentially might, but so far we haven't seen that, at least with reasonable doses. So this is where the industrial hemp comes in. Essentially, at the bottom, you can see here, it says, in general, industrial hemp means a plant of the genus cannabis and any part of that plant, whether growing or not, containing a delta 9 tetrahydrocannabinol concentration of no more than 0.3% on the dry weight basis. So in short, CBD, according to the industrial hemp federal and state definitions, cannot contain any more than 0.3% dry weight of THC. And that's what the products that you will see and that you will get that come from reputable sources will fall under. So,
and that's a U.S. definition. So those who then travel outside the country where CBD and THC is legal, or different, it doesn't really follow that. So you're used to that 0.3. That doesn't mean if you go to Mexico or outside of, the country, down into the Caribbean or anywhere else, I guess I shouldn't pick on those countries, but the outside the United States, just remember that's a U.S. definition. That's not a
that's
world definition, right?
And every time you enter a airport, it becomes federal. So that changes the ball game too. You could be, in Colorado having all the THC you want and go to the airport and get arrested, if you have any THC on you in the United States, obviously. So I saw a question pop up, what percentage of THC would get you high? It's a good question, but it's a kind of a broad question. Everybody's a little different. I have never used nor smoked marijuana or used an edible. I grew up with a naval officer father, so the punishment wasn't worth it to me. But other people have used it regularly, and it would take a lot more to get them high. The receptors do become tolerant to these medicinal agents. But you can see THC, 1 or 2% up to 25% THC per plant. So I would say anything if you've never used it, but certainly the higher the dose, the more likely you are. If you would get a medical marijuana card or just even do recreational THC, if it's allowed in your state, the shops that sell these are very, very educated, most of them, at least the ones I've gone in and talked to, regarding these products and helping you pick the specific one that you need for. Here's your set of problems, anxiety and sleep problems. You want this, and you're going to start at this low dose. And that's true of most That's true of most of the products, CBD and THC. Greg, there's one in here that says, do we know how much you need to lower 1 millimeter of IOP?
Mercury. Yeah, 1 millimeter of mercury.
Yeah.
And the question above it this all kind of falls into play. One of the things in my started my 6 or 7 years ago of diving into integrative and functional, and I really consider myself now an integrative optometrist at a higher level, maybe not the highest level, but understanding this is that we learn about bio individuality. So, I might say, hey, 10 milligrams will lower 1 millimeter of mercury. Well, that's in that individual. So the next individual, well, I gave him 10, it didn't do anything. And the same thing about with the question above that, it says what percentage would start, getting you high. Well, again, it's everyone has bio individuality. And I can tell you one thing that Tracy, in the last decade of hanging out with her, what I have learned is it's always about the receptors, right? And that's truly what happens in dry eye. That's truly what happens in thyroid eye disease. Things upregulate, things downregulate, and things work and don't work. So it's really hard, to say, what is the milligram, because everyone is individual there.
Yeah, no, that's for sure. I popped up to go get my CBD product, which I love, and mine is like 8.3 milligrams per dropper full. Sometimes you start with 3 dropper fulls, so that is about 24 milligrams. But again, and this is one of the products that's worked the best for me. I absolutely love it. But it's more not who makes it, but the type of product, and we'll talk a little bit about that. So CBD is the non-psychoactive component. And I was saying to my mom the other day, because she asked me to get her some CBD several months ago, and she's like, I don't understand. If it helps relax me and helps me sleep, how is it non-psychoactive? Which is an excellent point or excellent question. And I said to her, after noodling it for a couple of minutes, I said, well, these drugs, both CBD and THC, plug into receptors that we just discovered we had in the 90s. They're called endocannabinoid receptors. So basically, when we use CBD, it doesn't make us high, but it plugs into those endocannabinoid receptors and essentially says, fulfill your destiny, receptors. And those receptors are part of our, kind of mindful relaxation, good sleep type of receptors. And that's why it works. So CBD, again, will not pop up as positive as long as you're staying at less than or equal to 0.3% and that we're using pure products. Anandamide is our endogenous cannabinoid, our endogenous neurotransmitter that fits into the endocannabinoid system. So a lot of CBD in particular, but certainly THC and making it a little more mainstream, which, oh, by the way, 10 years ago, I thought would never happen. But it makes sense kind of how it came about. The endocannabinoid receptors were not really discovered that they existed until the 90s, which wasn't that long ago. And then really research took off with a couple of researchers in particular that showed the benefits of agonists at these endocannabinoid receptors and sometimes antagonists. So our CBD products in particular are thought to elevate our endogenous endocannabinoid neurotransmitter, which is anandamide. A lot of crazy words that sound the same. So let's go on and kind of look at what we're dealing with here in terms of structures and our products. So here is hemp versus marijuana. I'm a visual learner, and I thought this is such a great way to kind of describe it. I got it from this website, Homestead and Chill. So hemp product produces CBD oil, hemp oil, cannabis oil contains less than or equal 3%, 0.3% of THC. Marijuana can produce THC oil, marijuana oil, cannabis oil, and contains, there's that number, 15 to 20% of THC. You can get it lower than that as well, but that's kind of like the standard range. Hemp also can produce hemp hearts, which are a great source of protein, natural source of protein. I have hemp hearts every day, either on my salad or in yogurt in the morning. I put them on everything, and they're a great, high protein, and I think they're yummy way to get these products. So our endocannabinoids, other places where we can get some of our CBD chemicals. Here, let me get them all on here. Sometimes go a little crazy with animation. Endocannabinoids that are brain derived. So endo meaning endogenous sources are omega-3s, are good pure omega-3s balanced with our omega-6s, usually a 2-to-1 ratio of 3 to 6. Anandamide, which is abbreviated as AEA, is known as our bliss chemical. I'll mention that here in a moment, just a little bit more. Our phytocannabinoids, plant-derived sources, when you think of the hemp plant or cannabis sativa or cannabis indica and things like that, you see different parts of the plant. You see sometimes the seeds that will be more CBD based. You see the buds, the flowers, the leaves, etc. And some of that is more THC based. Synthetic cannabinoids that are lab derived. Oh, and I see your question here. So give me a second and I'll answer that about pain. Synthetic cannabinoids, lab derived, examples, THC. So this is an example of, we have marijuana that is a drug form, like dronabinol, which is brand name Marinol, or Syndros or Sesamet. CBD is that cannabidiol or the Epidiolex. So I have several patients on a marijuana product that they're in a research protocol for pain, to see, which different doses work. And I'm not part of the research other than just, dispensing the medication to them. So it's a good question. I was a chronic pain patient. Well, I guess I still am, except now I have a spinal cord stimulator that treats my pain embedded in my back. So when you're talking about CBD and THC for pain, it's a loaded question. So the question that popped up in the chat was, will the THC and or CBD work on the endocannabinoids receptors, or will it work on pain receptors? So the short answer is they will work on the endocannabinoid receptors in the endocannabinoid system. So, but what that will also do, not only the benefits of the endocannabinoid system, which we're going to talk about here in just a minute, but they also can increase our endogenous pain chemicals like endorphins, dynorphins, and enkephalins. So even though they're not plugging into opioid receptors and saying, hey, mu receptor, work better, we are raising some of the chemicals we believe that go along with the opioid system, which is our endorphins, et cetera, then those plug into the opioid receptors. So secondarily, we get some benefit that way, we think. That's a great question. Okay, so synthetic cannabinoids, I already kind of mentioned these, that, they're, the synthetic THC portion I just mentioned, but the synthetic cannabinoids that are considered lab derived, these are ones that we want to avoid. So we truly want only products that come from plant, not a lab derived product. A lot of them come from shady producers and distributors. There are case reports all over the place if you look hard enough, and it's actually not that hard to look, where like a mom somewhere in sort of the Midwest or Western part of the United States had a child that had intractable seizures. So she ordered a synthetic cannabinoid from, a pure producer, high-end producer of the product. And it was just, came from overseas. It was a crappy product. And the kid actually, initially his seizures were a little bit better, but 2 or 3 days into being treated with the synthetic cannabinoid, actually, they got much, much worse. And the kid almost died. So you end up with a situation where you have lower efficacy, increased adverse effects. They are not treated the same way as a drug. So you have to be really, really careful and selective where you get your products. You don't have to spend $1 million on them. There are, certainly some manufacturers and types that are pretty decent. But the synthetic CBD products should not be causing psychosis, paranoia, and side effects. But that's what we see. So are synthetic compounds. You know, they have a different synthesis. They can be used as an illicit product in spices. They're very high potency and they have serious side effects. So that's just kind of a little side comment on those products that you have to be careful of. Poll 4 shows where we're getting into.
Yeah, polling 4 is, have you heard of the endocannabinoid system? So we went to school, right? We learned about the Krebs cycle. We learned about I don't know, what's the pain cycle with, it's the arachidonic cycle, right? The arachidonic system. We learned about prostaglandins, the endocannabinoid system. Have you heard of that system? And, and I'm seeing the answers here as they roll in, and looks like the majority is going to say no. And again, that's why we do these lectures, is that, remember, it wasn't until, recently, that 2018, that we were able to, in a sense, go out and get CBD that was out there. But, the endocannabinoid system, like Tracy mentioned, maybe the 1990, it's now being taught in some of the schools, the endocannabinoid system, to be aware of it. So Joe, if you want to end that poll, I think we got a good representation. We got 13%, saying yes, they heard of it, and another 87% saying no. So don't feel bad, because we went to optometry school and went to our allopathic school, and we weren't really taught the endocannabinoid system. I'm just going to move it out of my way, Trace, and then you can have it. So, all right, go ahead and go forward.
All right. So let's look at how the endocannabinoid system works. We have CB1 and CB2 receptors, and you can see here that we have listed just a few places where one or both, one predominates over the other. So we have both CB1 and CB2 in the central nervous system, but CB1 is more so represented in the central nervous system. Genitourinary system with CB1, eyes, peripheral neurons, adrenals, heart, and lung. So this one is kind of considered, CB1 receptors, definitely more central nervous system, and then some kind of peripheral tissues or locations. CB2 is kind of considered a little bit of the CNS side, but more immune related. And it's important to point out that THC plugs predominantly into CB1 receptors. CBD plugs into predominantly CB2, with some crossover for sure. And everybody's different. Everybody's different. It would be easy to say every person has 1,000 CB1 receptors perfectly located in these areas, and everyone has 1,000 CB2 receptors perfectly located in this area. We know that that's probably not true if we could dump out, every cell in our body and count them one by one. But what we also think happens is that, even if every person did have 1,000 of each, some of them just aren't as receptive to the chemicals. So for whatever reason.
And Trace, let me kind of take a step as you're speaking, is in talking about these receptors. We've all learned about oxidative stress that's out there, right? And we found out in COVID that the oxidatively stressed person doesn't do so well with this condition. And what happens, what I want to point out with this comment, is when you have someone that's, maybe under oxidative stress, not getting those phytochemicals, those antioxidants that you hear us talking about, the receptors become, oxidized, and they go under that oxidative stress. And that's why, some people out there going with some of these questions that we got earlier, what percentage or how much should I take? We just pointed out that there's CB1 and CB2 receptors, and who knows, 2 years from now, we might be talking about 3 and 4 that's out there, and where they're located. But what happens is these receptors, in a sense, can become damaged, or, from oxidative stress that's out there. When you cut that apple in half and it starts to, shrivel, rip, and rot, and then you put some, some antioxidants on it and cover it with fresh fruit, and it doesn't rot, or that bananas don't turn brown. That's the same thing can happen with receptors. So that it all depends on how, someone might be a good person that's not oxidatively stressed, and they'll react to a different medication based on these receptors. So I just wanted to point that out as you were talking. So
Yep, pharmacogenomics.
there you go.
So here's our AEA. I just wanted to kind of link it to some of the things that you may have heard and maybe not even thought, oh, well, maybe it's the endocannabinoid system involved, but now you will. So I already showed you that we called anandamide, which is our endogenous cannabinoid. People call it the bliss chemical. It's when you hear people say, hey, I got my second wind. We think the endocannabinoid system is involved. I feel euphoric. I get a runner's high when I run more than a certain amount of distance. Acupuncture, yoga, Pilates, massage, osteopathic or chiropractic manipulation, anything that you can think of that allows you to kind of just take a moment and look around and enjoy whatever you enjoy. I live on a farm. I have a huge garden that I go there every day, a few times a day, and I can just pick up my plants and whatever, and that is bliss to me. But you also hear a lot about just being peaceful and different ways to kind of match your heart and your brain, your autonomic nervous system together. And however you go there, that is your endocannabinoid system minimally, and probably other chemicals in your body that are leveling out to just make you a healthier person in general, mentally and physically. So we always have heard that, oh, marijuana might be a gateway drug, and, it can be really problematic and addictive in some. And there's some truth to both of those statements. But what we've learned about the endocannabinoid system is that it works backwards from what we typically see and remember from our traditional neurotransmitters. So over here on the left, it says neurons, where traditional neurotransmitters plug into the receptors like norepinephrine, dopamine, glutamate. They are presynaptic chemicals that cross the synapse and plug in postsynaptically to cause an effect. And part of the reason why initially everybody said, oh my gosh, THC marijuana is a gateway drug, is because we did finally learn, particularly in the 90s, that the endocannabinoid system works backwards. So they have postsynaptic activation. The endocannabinoids, either anandamide, THC, or CBD, they work postsynaptically. They move across the synapse to presynaptic location, and essentially they plug into the cannabinoid receptors there presynaptically. So essentially the concern was, holy cow, they're working presynaptically, so they're basically controlling all of the other neuroreceptors or neurotransmitters rather. And there's some truth to that, but at least as far as CBD is concerned, that's a good thing. And even some amount of THC in a lot of people, it's also a good thing, and it can work beneficially in your body or in your patient's body. So it's kind of a ta-da, these presynaptic cannabinoids can now control what happens next. But again, that's not always a bad thing, because keep in mind that if you're somebody who's high test, with your adrenal shooting out cortisol and norepinephrine swirling around in your system because you're always high sympathetic tone, both CBD and a little bit of THC or a little bit of THC can turn that down and really, put your body into better state of homeostasis, essentially. So mechanism of action, again, we already said about the dopamine and glutamate, et cetera, and that CBD and THC have reverse neurotransmission. So THC and CBD are different from one another, and I already mentioned that. Sometimes they can have opposite effects. So let's look at a picture, because I already said this slide where it says in the middle, especially in the CNS, you have differing effects between CB1 and CBD. And if you recall, CB1 receptors are mostly THC. It's alphabet soup. That's pharmacology. It's just letters thrown together in random orders, and then we call it a drug and an effect. So CB1, THC, and CNS. That's what goes hand in hand. CBD, CB2, and it's usually CBD, CB2, and it's mostly immune system effects. So in my case, since I have autoimmune disease in my body that's fairly well controlled, I do use CBD to kind of keep my immune system in check and keep me from relapsing into rheumatoid arthritis and lupus. So with our THC, which can be an agonist to both CB1 and some CB2 receptors, it has a much higher affinity. And that is one of the reasons why you can potentially see more side effects, more adverse drug effects from the THC products. It has everything to do with receptor, drug, or compound complex and the affinity of those chemicals plugging into the receptors. So THC can slow the development of frontal lobe growth. And that's why, particularly in young people, particularly young males, THC use on the regular, or, even not that much, but just consistent use can be very problematic. So not generally recommended for young brains, until the early to mid 20s. Nociceptive pain, THC can mask the symptoms of nociceptive pain, and that's a good thing. Nociceptive pain is essentially you break your arm hurts, you cut off your finger hurts, as opposed to neuropathic pain, which is the nerve pain. CBD as a product can have antagonist activity at these receptors and a lower affinity, and that at the receptors. And that's sometimes why you get THC doing one thing and CBD doing another. So tuck that in the back of your brain here for just a minute, and we'll give you some examples. Safe for immature frontal lobes, CBD, and I know some parents that will use it in their kids, and, others that are like, no, thank you, I'm just not using it. No intoxication or euphoria or paranoia in normal doses and with a pure product. It does have anti-inflammatory reaction, again, tied to those different areas in the body that have immune system regulation, and CBD is great for that. Additionally, THC and CBD do not cause the respiratory depression and heart attack, like sometimes we see patients having those problems on opioids. I mean, respiratory depression and opioids, that's what will kill you on an opioid. So that's something else to consider. You see patients who are chronic pain patients using CBD or THC along with opioids for the purpose of lowering the total amount of opioid that they actually need to use. So that's very common nowadays with pain specialists being licensed to get patients set up for medical marijuana. So this is just a little bit more detail about the CB1 receptors here, and, kind of what types of tissue that the agents will plug into. Our CB1 on the left and our CB2 over here on the right. Physiologic functions of the endocannabinoid system. You see pain control with the analgesia. Stress modification is a biggie, along with the analgesic potential. Appetite regulation. Most people will say, THC in reasonable doses can give you, the munchies. CBD doesn't seem to have much of an effect on appetite as much as THC, or that plugs into CB1 receptors. One of the things that we use prescription THC for is in patients that are cachectic with, no appetite due to cancer, AIDS, etc. So it's a great drug for that, or chemical for that. Energy balance and metabolism, memory, immune suppression, anti-inflammatory potential. So many different systems in the body. And like Greg said at the beginning of this lecture, it's just not taught. The only thing we're kind of teaching now, as a matter of fact, I just finished a textbook chapter that's coming out where, I did a part of it on THC and CBD. And, my point was for the students in the audience for which it was written was, you have to go farther than what you're probably going to be taught in your allopathic program, which is essentially, do you know some people use CBD and some people even use THC? So you have to know at least enough to look up what will interact with that, instead of saying that you have a load of people who will be using one or the other of these products for benefits. So here's our THC or weed, as it's called colloquially on the left, and our CBD or our hemp cannabidiol on the right. What I wanted to just kind of point out with this, or what Greg and I kind of put together here, is there are different species more than this. Cannabis sativa, cannabis indica, and cannabis ruderalis, and a pure THC person, like some of our really smart researchers will say, that you cannot actually tell me which one it is. Like most of the things you read about CBD will say, just kind of in blogs and different things like that, will say it all comes from cannabis sativa. But him and her, the two people that I like to read, they're like, you can't even tell. But if you go to a marijuana shop, whatever you want to call it, marijuana shop, THC shop, a medicinal marijuana place, they will have the cannabis sativa, cannabis indica, and cannabis ruderalis, and even more. They'll have a questionnaire asking you specifically what your symptoms are and what you want to use to improve, and they'll pick out the specific formulation for you to make those symptoms better, if not, to go away completely. So just remember, on the THC, weed, marijuana side, it's going to be anything greater than 0.3% dry weight coming from the industrial hemp, and CBD is less than or equal to 0.3%. And even here on the bottom left, it says THC up to 30%. So you've seen a couple of different ranges. It's kind of all over the map for sure. I already said this, and Greg mentioned it as well, that THC, or the USA legal definition of THC or marijuana, whichever one you want to use, is anything over 0.3% by dry weight. Look at the structures. They're so similar to one another. If you look at morphine and, oh, this is a good one. Look at these structures, cannabidiol and tetra-9 hydrocannabinol, CBD and THC. They're very similar, with bigger side chains, bigger side chain on the right-hand side, the THC. If I had up here pictures of the structures of morphine, which is an opioid agonist, can get you high, can treat your pain, can kill you with respiratory depression. And then right next to it, I had the structure of naloxone, Narcan, which is a pure opioid morphine antagonist. You would be shocked how close their structures are. And they do absolutely the antithesis of one another. One is an agonist, one is a pure antagonist. You get a similar effect with CBD and THC, with one being an agonist, more the THC, and more antagonist effect with the CBD. And that's beautiful pharmacology right there. So just another pretty picture showing you CBD, no high, THC gets you high. And again, look at this range right here under the word marijuana. It says higher THC, 5 to 25%. But by the federal and state definition, it really is anything greater than 0.31% or higher is considered THC or marijuana. But this one I love because it shows that it's coming from the same plant. This I just thought was interesting. I want us to get into our different formulations and some examples. So I'm just going to go through this very quickly, but THC growers and CBD or hemp growers grow their products very differently. CBD, you have a little bit more of a liberal way to not quite as tightly controlled in terms of the growing, et cetera. It's a lot different. And you get many more products from CBD, but from the single chemical, you have over 20,000 uses of this, either one of these particular components. This I'm going to have kind of Greg get into because he gives a good spiel on quality control of these products. The company that he likes, or the one of the products that he was mentioning for the drusen reversal has really good quality control and purity standards. So I'm going to let him kind of go through this.
Well, you usually do the GMP stuff, and then Tracy, there's a slide coming up here with what you're referencing. So,
and let me just okay, I'm glad to do that. Question just popped up. What does a hemp plant look like? hold on, let me go back one. Uh-oh, can I go back?
Yeah.
Oh, there we go. This here in the middle is the hemp plant. And that's why I like it, because it shows you on the blue left side, you can get hemp from cannabis sativa. Oh, I guess I kind of get your question. Hemp and marijuana are exactly the same plant. It's what they're broken down into and made into is what is determined by the percentage of THC. So I don't know if I can show you a specific structure. When Greg's talking, I'll look. I've never actually thought about it that way, but yeah, they come from the same plant and they really have been inappropriately grouped together. 10 years ago, like I said, I would have been like, oh no, no, no. They, one's bad, one's kind of bad, but no, we've come a long way. So
Tracy, there
Greg,
was another question above that one. I'm not sure if you saw. It says, will CBD normalize C-reactive protein and ESR that occurs in rheumatoid arthritis?
that's a very good question. And again, it's a complicated one. I started with resolvent fish oil, and literally I had a holistic medicine doctor friend who is an OBGYN who gave up her practice and went into functional and integrative medicine. And anyhow, I was there. She was just doing a regular exam and I was chatting with her and I was leaving and she goes, oh, wait, hold on. She pulled out of her bag this bottle of resolvent fish oil, which I'd never heard of. And she chucked it to me and she goes, oh, my dog that has arthritis is doing great on this. Why don't you try it? And I was like, okay. So I started using it. And within 9 months of starting this resolvent fish oil at very high doses and also changing my diet and adding other, functional medicine type components. That's what got me off Remicade first, then methotrexate, then Plaquenil. So in terms of the CBD, I do believe, am I sure that CBD could itself lower C-reactive protein and erythrocyte sedimentation rate? I think it works together well with other integrative approaches. And some of those are dietary, removing anything that could be inflammatory and autoimmune disease, gluten, which I know nobody's ever happy about, but gluten-free baking and cooking and whatever has come a long way. I'm a master sourdough baker now, gluten-free. Dairy is another biggie. So just start looking into it. Shoot me an email and I can give you some ideas on, what to do, because rheumatoid arthritis is miserable for sure. And I'm doing great compared to how I used to be. So GMP is simply a quality control standard. It's just, it means good manufacturing practice. And it's this literal stamp that you see here on this slide that is mandatorily required for drugs, which would be prescription and over the counter. It assures the identity, strength, quality, and purity of drug products by requiring the manufacturers to adequately, go through this quality control manufacturing process. Now you're kind of thinking like, duh, but believe it or not required for dietary supplements, which I know CBD doesn't really fall under, but it kind of does because it doesn't require a prescription for what we're talking about, CBD and THC. So with all that being said, if you can find any supplement, whether it's CBD, THC, fish oil, anything with a good manufacturing practice stamp on it, you've got a good one. If it's not there, it doesn't necessarily mean you have a bad one, but there are other quality control and purity standards that can be, can be put on a product to show you that it's a good one. But the problem with dietary supplements in particular, and like I said, with the synthetic products, synthetic CBD in particular, I could make it in my basement. Like me and Joe and Greg and Vanessa could get together next weekend and say, all right, who brought what? You brought some spearmint, you brought some THC. I, killed some fish, squeezed the oil out, and I have a little, basil growing in my garden. Let's make it into a soup, and then we'll suck all the liquid out. We'll put it in bottles and call it OEC Magic product. And we could just say, hey, for healthy living, nothing attached to a specific disease. And we could sell it for $55 per bottle, Well, who checked to see that, we're saying it has this amount of basil, this amount of spearmint, this amount of whatever? Nobody's checked that. We're just saying it. And the FDA is not going to crack down on us until somebody was like, hey, I think they're saying things they shouldn't, or, oh my gosh, this thing made me think I was a squirrel for 3 days. That's the sad story with dietary supplements. So if you see a GMP stamp on there, you've got a good product, at least in terms of if they say there's 500 milligrams of omega-3s in it, there's a 500 milligrams, and they've been done, from a peer perspective.
Tracy, you think we can have that made by Mackinac Island by the end of August? We can
Oh,
start
you
selling it there?
betcha. I'll can it for you and bring it in my mason jar.
All right, Joe, looks like he's launching polling question number 5. I think this is the last one, and then we can kind of cruise through it because we're getting close here. But
Yeah.
CBD seems to have limited indications and potential benefits. CBD seems to be limited in its indications and its potential benefits. So, Trace, you want to look at some of the questions that have rolled in up there?
Oh, yeah. Let's see.
While they're doing this. Somewhat confused on, does the manufacturer make CBD with less than 0.3%, or do they start with an illegal substance? Do they start with that marijuana and kind of titrate it down?
Okay, so essentially what you're asking is you have the THC component. THC comes from hemp and CBD comes from hemp. So basically, are we just making an illegal substance less potent? Well, you don't necessarily have to take that cannabis sativa, which was the plant that I showed you that had the blue on the CBD side and the green on the THC side. You don't have to go through THC to get to CBD. And I think that's what you're asking. Essentially, what you're doing is you have this plant that is, however they break it down, structurally, into a usable substance. Basically, what you're doing is making that substance less concentrated. And we use different parts of the plants too. You use the seeds and some other parts of the plant for CBD. So it hasn't been pollinated necessarily. And you could use, the one right next to it is the buds and the flowers. That would be, what you would get more concentrated THC. So we can control that. So no, you don't necessarily, or I don't know that they ever go through THC to get CBD. I don't think that that's the case from what I've read. Interesting question though. Sure, for sure. I like that.
So we can see here that the audience is kind of split, that it has limited indications and potential benefits. So go ahead and go to the next slide.
All right, let me get rid of the questions here. Okay, so we're moving along here. We're going to get into some benefits and some case sets and some products, which that's vital for this discussion. So look at some potential benefits, and this is really CBD, maybe THC as well, glaucoma, cancers, anxiety, depression, chronic pain.
Let me grab the
headaches.
remote, Trace. I got to move this out of the way here.
Oh.
So the polling question, as you know, gets in the middle of the screen. So go ahead, you got it.
Oh, I don't even see it. Headaches, chronic pain, seizures, insomnia, and other potential uses. So if you have any interest in at least just learning about this, even if you don't know, or you already do know that you don't ever want to take it or whatever, that's fine. That's certainly your prerogative. But what I encourage you to do is even something as simple as Cancer Centers of America. Every patient that goes to a Cancer Center of America gets a functional medicine, integrative medicine component of that. And they use THC and or CBD in a lot of these patients, plus other holistic type interventions, and just, kind of start sniffing around and read case reports and studies and things like that. And I think you'll be surprised. Not everybody's going to have a benefit from CBD, that's for sure. So the last thing that I want to say before we kind of get into, some of these potential benefits and uses, et cetera, and products, practical applications and side effects. CBD is pretty low on the side effect or adverse drug effect list. You may see some elevated liver function tests, particularly AST and ALT. Remember, AST and ALT are the ones we check always when we think that there's an acute change in the hepatocyte, our liver function. So there are additional liver function tests, but if we're trying to say like, oh my gosh, are you toxic from Tylenol? Or holy cow, why did you eat that mushroom in the middle of the woods that you knew nothing about? Or, hey, are you using you're just here for a yearly exam and we're doing AST and ALT. People, there are some people that we think are just more sensitive from a hepatocyte perspective to CBD and even THC. So if somebody pops high AST and ALT, they should be asked, do you do any CBD or THC? If so, we usually stop the product and see if it goes back down to normal. But in a lot of cases, it doesn't. So just something to consider. Drowsiness, dizziness, particularly with higher doses. So you start at the lowest dose of CBD and THC and kind of work your way up. Diarrhea, dry mouth, hypotension. These are ones that have been seen in patients taking them. Increased intraocular pressure, particularly with our CBD product for sure. Change in appetite, not very common. The worsening of Parkinsonian symptoms. THC we think is probably better for Parkinson's disease. It doesn't seem to be as good. And I had one patient take a humongous dose of CBD first time that she ever used it and said that she told me her vision was swirling and she could see through walls. So that was too high of a dose to start with for sure. And moving on, let's see here. Yeah, high doses of CBD, that's the general place. The only thing I wanted to show you here is that there are some drug interactions with CBD. This goes along with the next slide, which, the cytochrome P450 enzyme system in the body is very different as it goes from one person to the next. So it's just kind of important to kind of look at the slide and think to yourself, there are some drug interactions with CBD, but the pharmacist, should be able to pick up on that even if they don't know right off the bat. So there are some drug interactions that will differ as you go from person to person. So warfarin, actually, I was just going to mention this as well. Warfarin interacts with everything. You can go down a rabbit hole so deep of warfarin drug interactions. So, this is kind of just thinking along the lines of if you have a patient on warfarin or maybe amitriptyline, valproic acid, other anti-seizure drugs, you always have to assume that something might interact with a systemic type drug or supplement. So that's just good medicine, kind of taking that into consideration and maybe having the patient look elsewhere. The genotype
Tracy,
testing, what's that?
Tracy, yesterday my mom had surgery and I took her to surgery and it was, the pre-op, the million questions, which are great, right? Because you don't want to have, problems, but they must have asked, 3 or 4 times, do you use CBD, and then she's, given, Lyrica or Neurontin, one of the two, gabapentin, I think is what it was for, to help with the pain. And I asked the question, hey, look, I do an opioid diversion course with a pharmacist. Why are you using that? And it helps with, the synergistic effect with the anesthesia. But it was kind of neat that they kept asking the CBD because of what you're talking about here with the different type of drug interactions that could happen.
For
so,
sure.
So because she's going under, she was under for 3 hours. So
yeah, so they want to know if she's on anything that could impact anesthesia for sure.
Exactly.
It was good that they asked. You don't often hear that.
Yeah, it's kind of neat.
So the pharmacogenetics, otherwise known as pharmacogenomics, kind of follows along the same line as what I was mentioning. And the example that Greg just mentioned with his mom, everybody's made differently. I had my Genomind, that's the name of the company, and their testing is Genomed. I can't remember exactly. That's just one that I used. I had both my daughters done just for academic purposes. But the nice thing about it is it gives you information on these drug interactions and how you will react to a litany of medications. So it was a cool thing for me to do, as a PharmD. And basically what it showed me was that I probably would do well on CBD, but if I ever did THC, I would probably have pretty significant psychoactive effects. And I do really well on CBD. I really do. And I have a new type of product, my Holistic Med guy is always giving me new ones. I'm like the guinea pig. But I found one that I really like, and it works great for, pain, anxiety, sleep, etc. It's a great product. So anybody can get this Genomind testing. Again, that's just one company that does it. There's no superiority of Genomind. It's just the one that my holistic MD used. There are lots of different places that will
Trace,
do
can
it.
you go back one slide? I think you skipped the
Oh,
slide
sure.
there.
And it's about $300 out of pocket if your insurance will not cover it. Oh yeah, sorry, I got so excited about the Genomind. And that will give you tons of information that can be useful for you as, your own book of knowledge for surgery or medications, etc. All right,
So when
this is Greg's thing.
Yeah, well, this is what I just like talking about, the three types of products in the market. If you go to a store, you start exploring, you can go get full spectrum CBD, and that contains, again, that trace amount of THC, that Delta 9, again, that 0.3%. But now what I want to point out is, if we talk about a banana and we say, what are the nutrients what's the nutrient that's in a banana? Everyone's going to say potassium. But, within the banana, there is magnesium, there's copper, there's niacin, riboflavin, vitamin C, there's fiber in there. There's lots of other, but it always gets touted for that potassium. Well, in that hemp plant, Tracy and I have just been talking about THC, we've been talking about CBD, but there's a whole other litany of cannabinoids out there that we haven't even talked about. We just talked about these two. I've heard up, hundreds, 200s, maybe it's thousands now of different cannabinoids that are in there. So that's kind of like saying, well, banana only has potassium. No, banana has a whole bunch of stuff. It's just known for potassium. Full spectrum CBD has this CBD and THC plus other cannabinoids in there. So they start working synergistically. So that's full spectrum CBD. Broad spectrum CBD now takes out the THC, and it has other phytocannabinoids and terpenes in there. And again, that will help you with not failing a drug test. You might, if you're really, really sensitive and your body can build it up, you might fail a drug test with full spectrum CBD, even with that trace amount, because remember, everyone's different. Now, isolate CBD is only the CBD. And this kind of goes back to that whole drusen talk that I was having, is that if you would, find like, okay, I'm using 15 milligrams of full spectrum CBD, you might have to give 150 if you just did isolate true CBD. Remember, because full spectrum has everything in it along with the CBD. When you just distill and keep distilling down, that's why people are like, oh, resveratrol, your product, or, hey, doc, your lutein that you're using only has 1 milligram. It doesn't have that, that 9-2, 10-2, whatever the ratio is that's been recommended. Well, yeah, when you give things at at an isolate dose, you have to give it at a very high dose. People are like, oh, your vitamin C is low in what you recommend. Well, not really. When I have all the other players there, that's called synergism in pharmacy. So I don't need to have all of that out there. So just be careful. I just want you to be aware that there is full spectrum CBD, broad spectrum CBD, and isolate. But depending on what you're giving there, you might have to give higher or lower doses. So that's it, Trace. You can move on.
Yeah, that's good. Even look up for anybody who's on Synthroid or levothyroxine or any of those products. There are, nutritional supplements like zinc is a biggie, so people who are like, oh, I can't use levothyroxine. I can only use Synthroid because it doesn't work at all. And believe me, I only use brand name Synthroid, but then they're like, it's just not working. My thyroid stimulating hormone, I was going to call it THC, TSH is, super high, which means I'm hypothyroid. It's just not working. Well, throw some zinc into there, either in your diet or as a supplement, and that'll fix the problem in a lot of people. So this synergism, concept has been around forever. These are just some of the product choices for CBD and THC: tinctures, solutions, creams, emulsions, candy bars, gummies, jelly beans, capsules, vape pens, etc. We generally don't recommend anything via a vape pen. I mean, I have patients who've come in that are like, my doctor gave me a prescription for Ambien, and I'm not anti-Ambien or Sonata or Lunesta, the Z hypnotics. You have to sleep. So however you can get to sleep, unless it's like, high dose heroin, you need to sleep. But he's like, I have edibles. And I have another guy who's like almost 80 who does a vape pen of marijuana. And I'm like, well, you're almost 80 and it's helping you sleep. So I would just do that instead of the Ambien if it works. So, it's kind of it's interesting, the conversations I have with some patients. But in general for CBD, I mean, I've got a topical product that I love. I just had 9 screws put in my right hand, so it doesn't move or anything like that, just a month and a half or so. And it's still very painful where all the screws are and the rehab part. So I have a topical product that I love. And then I also take CBD as an elixir or a tincture, because the sublingual route goes right into the systemic circulation. It bypasses the stomach. And so it's much faster and, fuller bioavailability.
I think the only other quicker way would be through an injection, right?
Yep. Give it IV or sublingual, but yeah, sublingual is a wonderfully efficient way. These were just some that I threw in, some examples of places where I would not order my CBD. If you look up dosing, there's lots of different ways that you're going to see dosing charts, etc. I didn't put the company name with this, but if you look at it, and this just trying to show you ways to choose a legitimate company, and Greg gave you some great pointers as well. But if you look just across the top of the weights, 25 pounds, 26 to 45 pounds, 46 to 85 pounds, 86 to 150 pounds, 15L to 240 BS, and then greater than 24 LBS. They didn't even bother to edit the weight chart. What they're saying fundamentally, mild or no pain, medium pain, severe pain, and how they're upping the milligram amount, that's pretty on track. So, the 8.3 milligrams of CBD per dropper full in my product, puts me at kind of a moderate dose, that's what I use every day. It works great. This is another one that has kind of some spelling errors in it, etc. But it's just showing you, sometimes you'll get a tincture that says there are 1,200 milligrams of CBD in this entire bottle of tincture. Mine says that, I think it's 1,200 milligrams. Mine says 250 milligrams of CBD in my entire bottle. It's a lower dose type product, which means that one dropper full of this product would give you 20 milligrams of CBD. So this is a more potent, concentrated product. And then it just says to you, which I agree with, take the recommended dosing amount based on the table over here by placing dropper amount under the tongue and swishing around. So I always say, dip your tongue into it so you can kind of taste it, and then swish it around for, I always say at least 20 seconds, if you can do 30, and then swallow the rest. So it gives you time to absorb through the mucous membranes and the sublingual area. This is just another one where there's all kinds of typos, etc. So if you need help finding a legitimate company, shoot us an email. But there's all kinds of, I mentioned all of these, and Greg mentioned some as well for uses all over the place. Great stuff. What else do we have here, Greg? Oh, this is the IOP, which I think we mentioned, but I don't know if you want to mention it and finish out the
yeah, just a lot of people ask about, CBD and THC and glaucoma. We kind of talked about it, but what we do know is that remember I just said, 12 different between advertisements and places on the way to the airport that I counted the other day, people can stop in. And you can see here that when you start getting around 40 milligrams, and you just showed a drop that had 20, so you put 2 drops in your mouth, boom, now you're at 40, and that can drive up your pressure. So that's kind of the rule of thumb that's out there right now in the literature. A daily dose of 20 to 40 milligrams of CBD, a systemic agent. Once you hit 40, it can start driving up that intraocular pressure. So a lot of us treat glaucoma. My mom was asked during the surgery preparation, do you take any CBD? Maybe we should be asking our glaucoma patients that are maybe having trouble, maybe they heard, oh, marijuana, now I'm going to just take a mega dose of CBD, and they don't realize that now when you get to 40, you're driving up the pressure. So I just wanted to bring clarity to that.
I'm going to take a quick question here, one from Dr. Farley. It says, out of the differing plant species, is it mentioned hemp is cultivated to be below 0.3%? No indication as to how to keep this plant going over the legal amount. Does not seem like an exact science in cultivation. I know exactly what you're talking about, and this is a true problem with all dietary supplements or things, of this ilk. But that's exactly why you have to look at how the lab, the manufacturing plant works, what their quality control looks like. If they've had the United States Pharmacopeia approval stamp, that basically tells you you've got a good product. The GMP stamp, good manufacturing practice as well. So for instance, Balance of Nature, and I'm just calling this one out because you see commercials all the time. I drink a cup of coffee in the morning at 5 a.m. I've seen 14 Balance of Nature commercials, and I'm like, I need to be on Balance of Nature. But then when you, try to get more information from them, and it could be a great product, but I was trying to get like exactly the components and the makeup and how much of this and that and whatever is in it, and their research data. No, it's a proprietary blend, which I get. You don't want to sell it, but you have to give us some data, or how would you have, practitioners wanting to recommend it? CBD is no different, but it is not legal for them to manufacture anything greater than 0.3% and call it CBD. Are those products out there? You bet. That's why I won't buy them in a gas station or in the dollar store, or, I don't know, from somebody, selling them like, soft pretzels in one hand on the street and CBD in the next. You just have to do your research, which is not too hard to do.
Yeah, kind of. It's probably coming up in a slide here, but there's a lot, when it comes to these natural products, and that's where I've been working. I'm definitely allopathic. I've mentioned I'm integrative, and I really learned this functional side. Is that, when it comes to nutraceuticals, like a lot of people will go, oh, we get a third party to test it, to tell what's in it. Now that's kind of, to me, just kind of more advertising to anything. Selection is important. The sourcing is important, specification, standardization. And then what I do is I like to find companies that test for what's not supposed to be in it, right? Yeah. These are plants. It could have bacteria, it could have fungus, it could have heavy metals, it can have fertilizer. So they send it out for third-party testing to see what's in it, but do you test for what's not in it? So those are the type of companies that I look for. And there are companies that actually do studies on their products that show what their product is claiming. Nora, I see your question here is, what is the pathway of CBD in glaucoma? Is it neuroprotective in glaucoma, as we're seeing with nitric oxide? Joe, I'm not sure if I know you do a lot of reading and you read a lot of papers. One of my closing statements is going to be we are just at its infancy. There are FDA studies that we're going to see coming up here quickly. I'll go through them. That do we truly know? We know that it lowers the IOP. Do we know that it does anything for glaucoma other than change the IOP? Is it protective? Is it not protective? That's out there. But is it neuroprotective like nitric oxide or not? I don't know the answer. But Joe, do you have any clarity on that?
No, I mean, it seems to be working on cannabinoid receptors, but even nitric oxide. Nitric oxide is not neuroprotective. There's nothing that's been shown to be neuroprotective. Nitric oxide increases the compliance of the trabecular meshwork, so that aqueous can flow out. Nitric oxide sounds nice, but just like alphagen, there is no demonstrated neuroprotection.
Yep. Could you please discuss the difference between?
I'm answering.
You want that one?
Yeah, essentially what I was saying while you were talking is it's a great question regarding, different extraction mechanisms. It's beyond my, knowledge of how I can discuss it. There's kind of a standard way of extracting the components out of hemp for sure. But the byproduct question is a really good one. And again, the only way we can really work around that to get products, that don't have a lot of additional, even just chemical byproducts, not necessarily things that are included in the plant, like heavy metals, et cetera, is the big push for things on even makeup and whatnot, that are ethically sourced, fair trade, things like that, not animal tested, like all different things. And the more that the public kind of pushes that, the more we're going to see it in products such as this. But there are a lot of companies that, just like Greg said, will show you exactly what is not in their product as well as what is, any number of chemical byproducts of cannabidiol or THC. But it's beyond the scope of what I can intelligently discuss. Maybe the next time. That'll be my project.
Go ahead and hit the next few slides, Tracy. I think you got some stuff on some guidelines, and then the honey dosing, and then I'll go through the studies real quick.
Yeah, the product that I'm using now, like people with CBD in particular, and even THC, they talk about the sweet spot with dosing, which is essentially for both of them to start low and go slow, which is what we should do with most medications. So, we have to learn how to rank the severity of our symptoms, think of like pain scales, that are the 1 through 10, and color scale, facial grimace scale, et cetera. We do that similarly with our CBD and THC. And then here's just one example: take 1 to 6 milligrams of CBD per 10 pounds of body weight. There are all different types of dosing regimens, but in general, we will tell the patient to give it 1 to 4 weeks, which I know is a huge range, but kind of after 1 week, I say, could you even possibly be 1% better in terms of whatever that sign or symptom is? And if they're like, yeah, maybe I feel a little, niggling of something, then I'm like, let's give it some more time. And maybe we'll push the dose a little bit higher. If it's not working after 4 weeks of, upping the dose, it's probably not going to work in that patient. There's something called honey dosing method. The product that I use, I showed you again. It's just, I love the actual formulation of it. But anyhow, this one has honey dosing. It's the worst tasting CBD that I think I've ever had, because it has nothing in it other than the chemical components of cannabidiol. But anyhow, you put it in your mouth, you use your tongue to kind of taste it, which I always do with any of these, and it tastes terrible. So then you swish it around, you swallow it. You keep doing that until it tastes like honey. And for me, it takes like 3 or 4 dropperfuls. Well, it's not even a dropperful, it's a quarter dropper, until it tastes like honey. And I'm like, dang it, if it doesn't taste like honey. And again, it's a wonderful product. So there's all different kinds of kind of quirky dosing methods, but this particular one is pretty remarkable. So again, the drug testing, there may be employment requirements, et cetera. Patients just have to know what they're getting. But where the pharmacy where I am, the CBD we have, I'm very confident in the company that I'm like, if you're just using CBD, it's not going to pop up on a drug test for sure. Watch drug interactions with the CBD and the THC. We've kind of mentioned all that. Remember the liver issues. If people have non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, if people have alcoholic fatty liver disease, if people, are big drinkers and they haven't reached the liver disease component of all that. The genotype testing, which is the one I was mentioning, the Genomind, lots of different things. Oh, so what causes the taste to switch from bitter to sweet in honey? Listen, I've spent a long time trying to figure this out, but this is exactly what it says. It's essentially when the receptors are saturated. That's kind of what they say. Let me tell you exactly at the end here. It says unique patented technology with immediate absorption. Already said that. Put and hold a quarter dropper under your tongue, roll around. Oh, here we go. So if it tastes bitter, you don't have optimal use. Essentially, it starts to taste better because the receptors are becoming saturated, the endocannabinoid. And once you've reached the optimum amount of endocannabinoid receptor being plugged up by the CBD, because I can't think of another word, I'm tired, then you kind of are at like oh, that's how the drug and its affinity to my receptors is for me. So that's all I need. And I've had my mom do it, my dad do it, my sisters do it, and theirs are very different than mine. So it's pretty remarkable. I thought it was kind of gimmicky, but it's not. Oh boy, that's a good question, Greg. Poll number 6, finishing up here.
Yep. And the question is, and I'm going to end it here pretty quickly because we got, getting close to that 10 o'clock
Yeah.
hour. FDA is doing studies on the efficacy of CBD. We've got a pretty good roll of people in here. I'm going to share the results. The answer is yes. And the majority, a few people saying no. And the FDA is doing studies on this. So, the whole point I want to kind of wrap up with this is kind of show you, like for fibromyalgia, the allopathic way is to use Cymbalta lyrica. And, there's some studies out there showing that, that gives you about an 8 to 10% really effective. And then using full spectrum, remember there's full and then there's the isolate and then there's in between there, then you have 62% saying very effective. So, maybe it's something for our fibromyalgia patients. Here's a hemp derived CBD full spectrum with opioids, 97 patients, 15 milligram soft gels. 53% of the patients stopped or decreased their opioid use in 8 weeks, and 94% showed better sleep. That's out there. So, the key here is we wanted to introduce this to you. There's been a lot of talk. We have patients coming in asking about this. So Tracy and I just wanted to kind of bring the optometry community up to speed. We're still finding stuff out, right? The endocannabinoid system is in its infancy. CBD with drug addiction, decreasing the reward center. This seeking behavior, we talk about this in our opioid lecture, decreases that. We have, CBD to, recommend and needing. Again, you need to know dosing, delivery, interactions, monitoring. This, pretty much goes like with everything that we talk about out there when it comes to drugs. And then, when it comes to looking for a company, I kind of talked about that. I hate that when people say, oh, I have a pharmaceutical grade nutraceutical. Yeah, that's kind of a buzzword that's out there that's being used too loosely. Medical grade CBD, do they have a certificate of analysis? Is it an ISO certificate for the cannabinoids? Are they checking for heavy metals, molds, fungus, bacteria? What's the manufacturing process? Is the planting indoors or outdoors? There's no fertilizers here. It's organic, but what's the next door? So, there's a lot that's out there. So you kind of have to pick and choose. And do they have scientists? Or again, is it like Tracy was alluding to earlier? Is it just Greg, Joe, Vanessa kind of throwing something together out there? Or is it people that truly understand, like these phytochemicals that you hear talk about that's out there? So with that being said, some general thoughts. I'll let Tracy do the general thoughts, but mine is, this is, again, an entry type of course for CBD, THC, and marijuana. And, we're at its infancy. Stay tuned. Tracy and I will keep updating us as years go by.
I think I kind of said all of this embedded. I get so excited, I go ahead of myself, but just keep reading and learning everything you can get your hands on. There's all kinds of, there are a couple sites I tried to get on that were like, this site is unsafe. It will lock up your computer and launch a nuclear weapon. So I avoided those, but there are plenty of others that, you can get great information. So keep learning and reading and decide what your thoughts are on it. Thanks for letting us spend the night with you.
So it looks like we got most of the questions or all of the questions. So
Yep.
I just want to thank everyone for attending. This was CBD, THC, marijuana, weeding through the choices. This is an interactive course that was given by myself and Tracy. Joe, thanks for being the moderator. And Vanessa, thanks for being our OEC conference administrator.
Thanks, everyone.